My name is Chuma Chinye, and I am your family lawyer. I was called to the Nigerian bar in 1988, and I have over 35 years experience in family law practice. I've helped countless families navigate Nigeria's complex legal terrain, and I am desirous of bringing this knowledge and expertise to you free of any charges.
It's a new day, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to your family lawyer. My name is Chuma Chinye, and I am your family lawyer. Today, we're going to take a journey into a very critical aspect of family life, one that is troubling, one that is really traumatic for victims and for a people as a whole. It's something that we abhor, but it's something that continues to occur, something that is less talked about and it should be talked about, something that is covered up all too often, and something that harms young persons and destroys adults. It is called domestic violence.
Domestic violence, often mistaken as the same thing as spousal, but they're not the same thing. Spousal abuse and domestic violence are pervasive issues in Nigeria, affecting millions of women and men. According to the Claim Foundation, 1 in every 3 respondents identify themselves as victims of domestic violence. But first things first, let us try to lay a proper foundation for this invaluable discourse. Let us provide clarity on the terms spousal abuse and domestic violence. Whilst often in lay language used interchangeably, spousal abuse and domestic violence have distinct connotations and implications. They actually mean slightly different things, one wider in context than the other. Spousal abuse refers specifically to abuse within a marital or intimate partner relationship setting. I am careful to include intimate partner relationship because these days you have people who cohabit, who live in sin, but they are not married. It emphasizes the abusive behavior of one partner towards the other, and it encompasses physical, emotional, and psychological, and oftentimes financial or sexual abuse. On the other hand, domestic violence has a broader definition because it encompasses abuse within various domestic relationships, including abuse of spouses, which is why I said earlier that one has a wider meaning than the other. An abuse could be domestic but not spousal, or spousal and domestic as well. So when you abuse a family member, such as your household staff, your son, your daughter, your mother, or your employee, that is domestic abuse. When it is your wife or husband, it's spousal abuse. Both spousal abuse and domestic violence highlight the imbalance of power and control within relationships. The one who is physically stronger, financially stronger, otherwise better positioned, is usually the abuser. And the weaker person, or the person in the lesser position, is often the victim. In summary, while domestic abuse refers specifically to abuse within an intimate partner relationship, domestic violence encompasses a broader spectrum, a wider range of abusive relationships within a domestic setting. In other words, abuse in an office space is not domestic abuse. Domestic violence in Nigeria is a widespread but grossly underreported and devastating phenomenon. Everyone knows about it, but many won't talk about it. It is widespread, but victims either don't or won't say a word. It seems like there is a code of silence between the perpetrators and their victims. But in reality, it is more often the case of overpowering. The victim is afraid to speak because of consequences that are threatened. Let us give you examples of spousal abuse and domestic violence. They include physical abuse, such as battery, beatings, torture, and acid baths. You know that one. And rape. These are common forms of physical abuse. In some cases, this violence, as we can see later on in this podcast, are fatal. Then there is sexual violence, forced sex, sexual harassment and molestation. And these are quite prevalent. About 25% of women have reported forced sex at some point or the other in their life. And then there is emotional and psychological abuse. There is verbal abuse, threats, intimidation, and control, which are used to manipulate victims. Let me add that denial or deprivation of sex by husbands or wives is one of the worst forms of spousal abuse, but it is hardly talked about. Well, sometimes, actually, if you take sex by force from your partner, you're going to prison for rape. Marital rape, it is called. I don't think that has got into this country yet, but we may get there soon. Then there is financial abuse, which entails controlling access to finances, withholding money, and exploiting victims. It's often caused by economic dependence. Well, let's just talk about acid attacks and acid baths. Usually a form of violent behavior that arises from jealousy and scorned lovers getting out of hand and going to disfigure people who they perceive have taken their loved ones from them. And then there is forced marriages, which are a bit prevalent in northern parts of Nigeria. Women and girls are forced into marriages against their will, often leading to domestic violence and other forms of exploitation. Imagine an 11-year-old girl being married to a Nigerian governor and senator. But it happened here, and nothing, absolutely nothing, was done about it. There is violence against pregnant women. Indeed, pregnant women face high levels of domestic violence, including physical and sexual abuse, which can lead to serious health implications for both the mother and sometimes the child. These are just a few, but they are examples used to illustrate the severity and complexity of domestic violence in Nigeria. Addressing these issues require a comprehensive approach that should involve the government, involve security agencies, involve civil society, involve the bar, the Nigerian bar, and the bench, and indeed all of us as individuals working together to provide support services, to challenge harmful social norms and promote justice and accountability in our domestic settings, in our homes, in our marriages, in our families. As I've just highlighted, domestic violence actually takes many forms, including physical, sexual, emotional, and mental abuse. In 2008, Demographic and Health Survey found that over 30.5% of married women have experienced at least one or more forms of physical, emotional, or sexual violence in their marriages. This is not to say that in today's Nigeria, it's only women that get abused. Men now get abused by their better placed wives who abuse them financially, and sometimes by their physically stronger wives who beat them up as well. One of the cases we're going to look at will show you how deadly a female attack on a man could become. Let's look at some of the cultural factors that perpetrate this abuse. Nigeria is a patriarchal society, and most of its cultural practices contribute significantly to the prevalence of domestic violence. The notion that men have the right to discipline their wives is deeply ingrained in some cultures. Don't ask me where. But in some cases, women are even expected to tolerate abuse as a sign of love and devotion to their husbands. Before I'm assumed wrongly to be a feminist, let me quickly chip in that I am not unmindful of the plight of a few men who are physically abused by their wives and those fortunate, in quotes, to have attained the glorified office of house husbands. If you are in that inglorious position, you're not too far from abuse of one kind or the other. You need to wake up. And as Igbo would say, go find money. Though Nigeria has laws and policies in place to address domestic violence, implementation remains a challenge. Violence Against Persons Prohibition Act of 2015 is a federal enactment that criminalizes domestic violence. But its effectiveness varies across states. Of course, you will know that in quite a number of the northern states, this will be difficult to implement because you may not even have access to the woman to know what they are going through. and even across the South too. Culturally, the dominant position of men makes it difficult for the women um, who are sometimes maltreated to come out and say what is going on. They want to preserve their marriages at all costs. Several organizations, including the Women and Child Watch Initiative and the International Federation of Female Lawyers, FIDA, provide support services for victims of domestic violence. These services include counseling, providing a provision of shelter, and legal aid. So if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic violence, there are resources available to help. The National Human Rights Commission and the Nigerian Police Force have established hotlines and support services for victims of domestic violence. You can also find help by visiting our website for free spousal support, for free spousal abuse detection and remediation advisory and support services. This episode will just be mere entertainment and at best, just informative if we do not provide you with actionable guides on what you should do if you are already a victim of spousal abuse or domestic violence, or if it happens to you after today, or if you know someone that is happening to, or if you happen tomorrow to know somebody that it may happen to. There are steps that you or those persons should follow. The first is to, as soon as possible, report the matter to the police. Every victim of a spousal or domestic abuse should immediately report to the police. Even a third party who becomes aware should report the abuse to the nearest police station. There are hotlines that are frequently shown on your television and on social media on how to report these incidents. Please store them in your phone and call as soon as an attack occurs. Now, after you've reported, it doesn't end there. You need to go ahead, persist in the police station, and obtain a report, a police report. This report will provide you with information that is essential for further legal action. It is a backup document you may need to use if the matter proceeds to the court or if future occurrences occur. Then, of course, you must simultaneously seek medical attention. Every victim of abuse or violence should immediately go to the nearest hospital. And if you know someone who's been abused, please assist that person. Take them to the clinic to receive medical attention and to document the injuries sustained. This is critical, to document the injuries sustained. And then, of course, when it's documented, you obtain a medical report. Ask the hospital or clinic to issue you a medical report. The medical report will serve as evidence of the attack. Well, let me also speak as a lawyer and as a family lawyer for that matter, and encourage victims of abuse to commence civil action for damages in a high court nearest to them. Of course, this is dependent on the severity of the abuse. Nobody encourages anybody to slap anybody, but if you commence legal action for damages for a slap that does not leave an injury, it may be a long journey. There may be other ways to remedy the slap. Apply for a restraining order. If there is persistent attack by your spouse or by your neighbor or by your boss, please obtain a restraining order from the court. Talk to a lawyer. This is not difficult to get. Once you are willing to engage the lawyer services, the lawyer should be able to, in a couple of days, get you a restraining order. It's often granted ex parte, that is to say, without hearing the other person. Then you can insist on the police. They call it pressing charges. You actually insist that the police should charge the person to court. If you have difficulty doing this, engage a family lawyer. He will engage the police on your behalf and serve as a go-between you and the police and ensure that the matter is investigated and that the offender is prosecuted. If you are a victim of abuse or violence, your best bet is to talk to a family lawyer to guide you on the best response to the situation and provide you with continuing advisory services until your wholesome situation abates. You heard me right. After all that we have said to you, our best bet perhaps is always immediately to engage a family lawyer as soon as an abuse occurs. He will guide you through all that we've listed and ensure that you are protected, and perhaps find a way to guarantee that the abuse doesn't continue. Now, the stories we're going to tell you today are eye-opening. You will see, for instance, that Christianity, or indeed being deeply religious, is not an answer. You hear people say, I need to marry a pastor, I need to marry a born-again Christian, so that my marriage can be good. It's not necessarily so. In the case we're going to show to you, Arowolo, who is a youth pastor at the Redeemed Christian Church of God, RCCG in Bagada Parish, in Lagos, southwest Nigeria, was convicted by Justice Lateef Okunu of the Ikeja High Court over the murder of Titilayo. Titilayo was his wife. She was a Skybank staff, and he killed her on the 24th of June in 2011 at their residence in Akimde in District, Isolo, in Lagos. Justice Okunu found that in a judgment that lasted over 3 hours, she found that evidence before the court proved that Arowolo actually murdered his wife in their matrimonial home. Guess what the defense of the pastor was? The pastor said that the wife killed herself. He claimed that Titi was obsessed by Satan, held down by the devil, and that she stabbed herself to death on the day after they had had a fight. Pastor Arowolo claimed that Titilayo was possessed by an evil spirit, and that she by herself inflicted several stab wounds on him before turning herself to herself and stabbed herself several times until she died. Is that believable? Not even when it comes from the pastor. It's not believable. Relying mainly on forensic reports conducted by Professor John Obafumwa, the pathologist, the court held that there was no way the disease would have stabbed herself. The judge found that by the law of last seen, Arowolo was the person who was last seen with his wife before she was stabbed to death, and no one but him could have killed her. She upheld the prosecution's case and found that evidence proved beyond doubt that Arowolo gruesomely murdered his wife with tremendous knife stab force. You can imagine how it is. You can think that somebody will stab herself several times. I've never come across a case of a person stabbing himself or herself to death. It is practically impossible to achieve. Immediately after the judgment, this pastor fell down in the dock and started shouting, Jesus, have mercy. Jesus, have mercy. Now, incidentally, he was sentenced to death on a Friday. That is just the anniversary of the day of the week and date of the week that he killed his wife. He came to court wearing a white short sleeve shirt and black trousers. And moments after he entered the courtroom, the pastor knelt down and prayed for about 15 minutes. After that, he started reading the Bible until the court started sitting at about 9:45 a.m. But wasn't all of this, weren't they too late? He should have read the Bible before the fight. Because as we have heard, he had a fight, physical fight with the wife the day before the murder. He didn't pray. The day he stabbed her to death, he didn't pray. On the day of judgment, pastor began to pray. But he had killed his wife already. Now, how did the court arrive at this judgment? A certain Professor Bafuma testified that he did an autopsy on the body and revealed that Titilayo was stabbed 76 times. This man of God stabbed his wife 76 times and turned around to say that she killed herself. How could one stab herself 76 times? She was stabbed in the eye, left eye, stabbed in the right eye and the upper chest area, the right chest, the left side, and the collarbone. What a dreadful price to pay simply for marrying somebody. This shows you how dreadful the consequences of domestic violence could be. The prof pointed out that it was impossible for the victim to have inflicted this kind of wounds on herself. And witnesses testified that the couple had lived a cat and mouse life. They claimed that the family had several times settled serious fights between the couple. Even though none of these witnesses saw what actually happened on that day, it was obvious the foundations for calamity had been laid. The fights, the abuse, whoever was abusing who among the two had been way too frequent that it led to the death of one of them. Next, we'll bring you the high-stake tongue tale of the ill-fated marriage between the children of well-heeled families in Abuja, northern Nigeria, the federal capital of this country, which came to an unforeseen bloody end when the abusive young wife stabbed her equally young husband to death. At the end of the morbid judicial drama that lasted almost 3 years, Justice Yusuf Halil of the Federal Capital Territorial Court found Maryam Sanda guilty of killing her husband, Yaminu Bello. Both were children of very prominent Nigerians. The court found that Mrs. Sanda stabbed her husband with a kitchen knife with clear intent to kill him. And so, in November of 2017, Maryam Sanda killed her husband after fighting with him throughout the course of the day. And despite the intervention of so many people who visited them, some of whom testified in court of their efforts to placate her, anger, she was suspicious that the young husband had a new consort. And they were both Muslims. The prosecution asked for death sentence, and the judge obliged them. And Maryam Sanda was sentenced to death. After the judge found her guilty and was about to deliver the sentence, Mrs. Sanda forced her way out of the dock and burst into tears, screaming, "Who will take care of my daughter? Who will take care of my daughter?" A genuine cry, or which in my view came years too late. Maryam surely should have thought about this in the course of the more than 12 hours of avoidable madness, before she eventually stabbed her husband to death. Her cries came too late. And you know what? The matter went up to the Supreme Court, and the sentence has been confirmed. Yeah, tragic stories you've heard, and we will round up this episode shortly. But before that, let me leave you with even a more heart-wrenching story published by the Punch newspapers on the 28th of November 2017. This again involves a bank worker named Arowolo Adejo, who was arrested by the Lagos State Police Command for the death of his 28-year-old wife named Maureen, because he killed the wife at their home on Peluola Street, Oworoshoki, in the Bariga area of Lagos, Nigeria. The 32-year-old Lagos MDG was alleged to have tortured his wife for 5 years, first with a belt and cut her with a machete. Their 5-year-old son, and this is a part that I couldn't quite take, but I'm going to struggle to narrate it to you. Their 5-year-old son, named Richard, was present throughout the incident. And when he was interviewed by a Punch newspaper, he said to them that his father forced a local insecticide called Otapiapia down the throat of his mother. His words, "I am Richard Adejo. I am 5 years old. My daddy beat my mommy with a belt, matched her here, showing the arm, matched her there, showing the leg. He used the belt on her here, points to the face. He forced my mommy to drink Otapiata. My daddy took my mommy away. My daddy said my mommy should get out of the house. My mommy said no. In the night, my daddy woke my mommy up and said, mosquito is too much. Let me go and buy Otapiata. My daddy forced my mommy to drink it. She shook her head. She vomited. My daddy slapped my mommy. My mommy did not do anything to him. Trauma that may perhaps be irreparable or irreversible. Trauma that he would have to live with all through his life. These stories were not just to entertain you. We told them so that you could begin to imagine how bad domestic violence could be. It's not you alone. It could be your neighbor. It could be your cousin. It could be your brother. If you know something, say something. If you're involved, think again. That one blow, that one slap could make you one of these stories that we have told. This has been today's episode of Your Family Lawyer. It's been my pleasure bringing this episode to you, even though I've had to do so with pain and agony because of the sad stories involved. You could be a change agent. If you're involved, put an end to it, because that one slap could make you one of the stories we've told here. If you know something, say something. Do not keep quiet. Take action today to stop domestic or spousal abuse. Until next week, I will bring you another edition of Your Family Lawyer. Stay informed, be empowered, and please be good to your family. My name is Chu Machinye, and I am your family lawyer.